Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I am Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
Office Bloke Daz.
Hey.
Yeah, we are the Office Blokes. And have we got anything to talk about? How's your mama's gabagool?
Beg your pardon.
No, well, you know what? We'll go for a quick one this time. How the Italian Mafia.
Quick one, 16.5 minutes long.
16.
Real quick.
How the a quick intro. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
42, who we have reacted to before, who seems to be. I don't know if it's a new thing. We've not reacted to him for a bit, and he's got like 5 million subscribers now. I don't remember him being that big
good
when
channel.
we reacted to him at first. Yeah, he's really good. I think he had a moustache and not like a goatee or a beard on one of the really older ones for some reason.
Right, okay.
I don't know. Anyway, how the Italian Mafia conquered America. Let's do it.
Hey, 42 here. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to tell you about gangsters.
That was a proper Jason Statham accent, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Gangsters.
Like it or not, Mafia mythology is murderously melded with the history of modern America. To some, the mob represents an aspirational way of life, full of girls, guns, and glamour. But there is, of course, a much darker side. This is, after all, an organisation that relies on fear to get what it wants, and is more likely to resolve disputes with a bullet behind the ear than a quiet word in it. Whatever your take on La Cosa Nostra, they've played an undeniable role in shaping our culture. After all, which of us doesn't have a favourite mob movie? And who can't misquote a piece of iconic dialogue on command? See the opening of this video for an example. But where did it all begin, this obsession of ours? Well, when it comes to the extraordinary rise and fall of the Mafia in America, it can all be traced back to the so-called Five Families. These powerful clans ran New York City for decades, making money from legitimate businesses whilst also profiting from illegal gambling, protection rackets, and contract murder. In doing so, they established a blueprint which would see organised crime spread across America and perhaps even have a hand in the death of a president. Trust me, if you think your family is bad, wait until you get a load of this lot.
I love gangster movies, like mobster movies specifically.
Yeah.
It's such a good genre.
There's great characters in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Always.
As long as you take Godfather 3 out of all of it and just pretend it never happened.
All right.
The rest of them are great.
Try living in New Jersey for a few years.
Did you experience lots of...
No, never.
No!
Hey, oh!
This guy.
It won't be the
Fucking
first
guy.
time in this reaction, I don't think, will it?
The origins of the Mafia can be traced back to the 18th century and the Italian island of Sicily. If Italy is a boot, Sicily is its amputated toe. Over the years, Sicily has been ruled by many different foreign invaders, everyone from the Romans to the French. But eventually, boot or no boot, the people grew sick and tired of being kicked about, and so they banded together. The groups they formed slowly evolved into private armies, who in time grew so powerful they could extort money from the very landowners who were supposed to be controlling them. These armies became known as families, each of which had its own secret codes and ways of meting out rough justice. In the late 19th and early 20th century, a great many Italians emigrated to the United States in search of a better life. This included a large number from Sicily, where poor economic and social conditions made the treacherous trip across the Atlantic seem like an attractive option. Many of these new arrivals settled in New York, particularly a spot on the Lower East Side of Manhattan that came to be known as Little Italy, for obvious reasons. Of course, it wasn't long before criminals from the old country began to exploit this burgeoning immigrant population across the pond. The notorious 5 Points gang, founded by former boxer Paolo Vaccarelli, emerged in 1890 and terrorized New York for 30 years. Meanwhile, spawning gangsters who would go on to be some of the most feared crime bosses ever, including Meyer Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, and even old Scarface himself, Al Capone. In 1920, Prohibition hit America, and surprisingly, telling people they could no longer drink alcohol went down about as well as turning up to a high school fancy dress party as Jimmy Savile. The US government might have believed it was a brilliant idea, but the general public most certainly did not. And it was boom time for anyone who could supply bootleg booze. This was the iconic era of trench coats and Tommy guns, as upstanding crime fighters like Elliot Ness battled the mob on the mean streets of New York and Chicago. Prohibition in the US coincided with the rise of fascism in Italy as Benito Mussolini came to power. Now, a tolerant attitude towards crime, or indeed anything really, is not in the brief of a dictator, and Mussolini came down hard on the Mafia, causing a large number of its members to head to America. This perfect storm of a major business opportunity and lots of new recruits saw the American Mafia grow in size and strength throughout the 1920s. For the most part, a man by the name of Joe "the Boss" Masseria was running things in those days. But a powerful Sicilian mafia don wanted to take over, so he sent his protege, Salvatore Maranzano, to make a big bid for power in the Big Apple. Maranzano gradually built up his own criminal empire before declaring all-out war on Masseria in 1930. For over a year, the two New York Mafia clans openly fought one another, with gang members on both sides guns down in the streets on a number of occasions. Eventually, on the 15th of April 1931, Masseria himself was killed in a restaurant by 4 gunmen. The person who'd arranged this mealtime murder was none other than his own right-hand man, Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Lucky was
Seems like a glamorous lifestyle to a degree until you're at the
Until
top
happens.
and then you get
Well,
shot.
Exactly, yeah. Dangerous.
Short-lived, mate.
Yep.
If there was ever a guy that was going to screw you over, though,
Yeah, I mean, would you trust that guy? Come on.
proper upstanding citizen, isn't he?
Got a shirt and tie on.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
a gangster to his very core. As a teenager, he cut his teeth in the 5 Points gang before making his fortune in bootlegging. And he got his nickname after surviving a knife attack that left him with a drooping eye and distinctive scars across his face. When Luciano realised the war was going badly, he just switched sides, betraying his boss on the condition that if Maranzano emerged victorious, Luciano himself would be made second in command. Upon winning, Maranzano promptly reorganised the mafia gangs of New York into the so-called 5 families. In a bid to consolidate his newfound power, he then named himself Capo di Capi, the boss of all the bosses. But this snazzy title didn't go down all that well with the heads of the 5 families. They already disliked Maranzano, who they saw as greedy, arrogant, and old-fashioned, and the attempted power grab proved to be the literal last nail in his coffin. 4 hitmen, posing as government agents, went to Maranzano's office, disarmed his bodyguards, then made sure that he too would be sleeping with the fishes. Once again, it was Lucky Luciano who set up the hit. You know, I'm beginning to think that he can't be trusted at all. What's the world coming to when a mafia boss can't be taken at his word? Anyway, with both of the old school bosses now out of the way, it was time for the mafia modernizers to have their turn. Given that he'd so ably got rid of the 2 previous big dogs, it would have been reasonable to assume Lucky Luciano himself would take the throne and declare himself the new boss of bosses. But he didn't. In fairness, having personally ordered the murders of the previous 2 incumbents, he knew all too well how dangerous it was to be the mafia's head honcho. So, instead, he established something called the Commission, which was made up of 7 mafia leaders, including the heads of all the 5 families, and would be responsible for overseeing the activities of the mob and mediating disputes between rival gangs. They met every 5 years to iron out major problems and just generally put the organisation into organised crime. Now, if there's one thing you don't expect from the mafia, it's high-level admin. Putting horses' heads in people's beds, sure, we're all on board with that. But a HR department? That's just weird. With a solid...
It's obviously why they flourish so much, isn't it, though?
Well organised.
Well, very well organised. But
Yeah, I know.
massive corruption as well, wasn't there? I think in the police forces and government and places like that.
Well, the prohibition just left a vacuum, didn't it? And then they just filled it, made an absolute fortune doing it, and then could pay the cops so much more than they would get paid normally. Then
Exactly. It's basically got free reign, I think, didn't they?
Bigger than ever now.
you think?
Not just the US, the Italian mafia, but organised crime around the world. It's bigger than ever.
You think?
Yep.
I think it's
huge.
it's definitely not on this scale as in one organised unit though, because
Oh,
I
I
think
bet it is.
too many people just grass on
I
each
bet,
other
I bet
nowadays.
globally it's all one unit.
You think?
Yep.
Or you
I
thinking
bet
like
they all work as agencies with each other.
You think they're all in Davos at the moment,
Yeah.
or they were
No.
last week?
I think they all work as agencies with each other, and everyone's in cahoots together to make it a smooth operation. As
Interesting.
Sade once said.
A smooth operation.
Interesting.
But a HR department? That's just weird. With a solid structure in place and war behind them for now, the five families started to move to a whole other level. But as alcohol was decriminalised once again, they needed to look for fresh new avenues to make money. The traditional money spinners like robbery, extortion, loan sharking, and money laundering all continued as normal, but it was time to diversify the family business. So they infiltrated the labour unions, which allowed them to establish themselves in industries like construction, trucking, and the career of choice of Tony Soprano, waste management.
It's a bit of a side thought, but I've got to say it before I forget.
What, you haven't for dinner tonight?
Yeah, at Karen's Diner. No, there was. I watched a prison thing in America a while ago where they'd banned smoking in the prison, and they said all of the illegal drug trade pretty much became illegal tobacco trade, and it's like kind of a lesser of two evils, if you know what I mean. And I wonder if that's why they don't legalise weed in this country, because of the organised crime element of it, and the government are maybe looking at it like, let's keep a lot of the criminals doing that, which is low harm.
Instead of it's taken off out the way, they're going to look for something else.
Because they're not just going to go, oh, go and work at Tesco then.
No.
Well, that's what I've alluded to on a few videos that we've done. That if you legalise all drugs and that, then they're going to have to look for something else to
which
screw people
is exactly
over with.
what's happening here with prohibition ending, and the criminals
Going
are going
into
to criminal,
different-
but they're just going to do something else.
Going into different
It's like
businesses,
when you get involved in crime, these people are involved in it at the high level. Not that I know this, by the way. This is just what I'm assuming.
It's all alleged.
Yeah, but you look at the local drug dealer down the street. We all know.
you know.
Do you know what I mean? The local drug dealer doesn't sell. He's like a supermarket. He doesn't just have weed. He has everything. He has
Yeah.
E's. He has Coke. He has, you name it. He has a bit of everything.
There's
Yeah.
He's like a drug supermarket.
I
Yeah.
think people who sell harder stuff sell everything. I think there's a lot of people that just sell weed because criminally they're not going to go away for 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah, well,
But they're like the small. They're not the organised crime elements.
they're the nobodies.
They're like the peripheral
yeah,
dealers.
Yeah,
The-
police won't even bother with them.
Yeah.
They're not interested. I'm talking like higher ups, like, they're just kids who want a little hobby to do.
Yeah.
So like scout around, buy like, they'll buy like, 500 quid's worth of weed and then try and sell it for make an extra 200 quid on it.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the people that are importing shit at high level,
Yeah.
containers and containers worth, stowed illegally.
Yeah, high level.
When it's worth like £54 million on the street.
Yeah, well, I suppose part of it is if you've got tons and tons of weed coming into the country that stinks and takes up loads of room, and then you've got these little bricks like that that are worth a fortune.
Yeah, but you're probably not importing weed on a level. He's grown locally in it, sort of thing, and it's cultivated locally. He's just grown on like the larger scales. That's toy shit. That's kiddie stuff. That
I saw someone the other day, bumped into him that you guys knew and possibly still know through like a vicarious family that he's part of, we'll say. And I just bumped into him and we were talking in the place that he works, and we're talking about the cost of electricity and things, just weirdly enough. And
he's going
Rock
through
and roll.
loads. He's going through loads.
no, there was more to it, but I can't without I'd give too much away if I said more.
Yeah.
And this is in his place of work, and he goes, "Yeah, my electric bill's about $450 a month." And I went, "Jesus, have you got a grow on the go?" And he just kind of went. This is in front of his work colleagues, and he's like, "Yeah, something like that."
No, but the one talking about the organised crimes, it's on a widespread thing about everything that's moving through that shouldn't be moving through, going to places you shouldn't be going, and how to make money. And these guys are the kings of it. And it's a global.
I think
massive,
people
it's bigger than
are
it's
one
ever
of the
been.
big commodities for organised crime nowadays.
Bigger than it's
Modern
ever been.
slavery
Yeah,
and stuff.
of course it is, yeah.
Trucking and the career of choice of Tony Soprano, waste management. In the 1940s, the city of Las Vegas was starting its meteoric rise to become the greatest center of vice on God's green earth. despite being on the opposite coast to the Five Families' traditional stomping grounds, the promise of profits proved too pretty to pass up. They bankrolled a number of casinos as Sin City swelled and would skim money from the huge sums of cash taken on the floors every night. A scam thought to have netted them hundreds of millions of dollars. For decades, it seemed as though the Mafia was untouchable. Their code of silence, known as Omerta, meant that members were sworn to secrecy and forbidden to cooperate with police under fear of death. Infiltrating the families was practically impossible because allegiances often went back generations to the same small towns in Italy. The US government seemed woefully behind the curve as the mob continued to grow in both power and numbers. But then, slowly, law enforcement started to fight back. In 1950, a special committee was set up to investigate the existence of organised crime, and it held hearings in 14 cities across the country, including testimonies from over 600 witnesses. The hearings were televised at a time when TV was just starting to take off, and it was the first time most Americans had even heard anything about this shadowy organisation, which seemed to exert influence over huge swathes of their country.
If so, what are they? Paid by tax.
All of this attention was obviously bad news for the mob, but if the 50s started poorly for the Mafia, it was nothing compared to how it ended. In 1957, a meeting was arranged in the small town of Appalachian in upstate New York. It took place at the house of a man known as Joe the Barber. This coming together of the clans was a national Mafia meeting with more than 100 important crime bosses and assorted henchmen in attendance to discuss all kinds of nefarious activities and, one can only assume, have a bloody good catch-up whilst they were at it. The problem was that Appalachian was little more than a hamlet, the sort of place where big news would usually be the mum and pop store on Main Street running out of milk. So when numerous flash cars arrived and deposited large numbers of extremely well-dressed, severe-looking gentlemen in the middle of town, the local police force couldn't help but wonder just what the hell was going on. They raided the property, causing the highly unusual and not a little humiliating scene of dozens of gangsters running away to hide in the nearby woods. Amazingly, this shrub-based counterintelligence tactic didn't work, and 60 of them were arrested. Not only was this a very embarrassing incident for the Mafia, but it once again shed light on what was supposed to be a top-secret organisation, although any sense of secrecy would completely evaporate just 2 years later. In 1959, a mobster called Joe Velacki was convicted of drug trafficking and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Whilst inside, he murdered a fellow inmate, a move that saw his sentence extended to life behind bars with no chance of parole. Clearly, the prospect of eating slop from a tray and trying really bloody hard not to drop his soap in the shower didn't thrill Velacki, because in 1963 he agreed to testify about his time in the mob. This was the first time a made man had ever taken the stand and publicly admitted the Mafia existed, let alone gone into details about its structure and activities. Velacki even went as far as to name many current and former gangsters, including bosses of the major families. Velacki's hearing was part of a crusade by Attorney General Robert Kennedy, who'd made it his personal mission to target organised crime.
Are you flipping under the same circumstance? Life without parole, and they say, just tell us what we want to know.
No, you can't grasp.
You go into witness protection for the rest of your life. You can be out and about doing whatever you want.
No, you don't grasp.
I'm not doing life without parole.
You won't last long getting out.
I'm not a criminal though, that's the thing. I haven't chosen that life.
If you grasped on somebody at any level, you're going to pay for it, aren't you?
Big call, isn't it?
I mean, anyone life without parole in prison is going to start questioning things at some point. When people are dangling a carrot in front of you going, you could be out, you could be, or you're going to die here, you're going to grow old and you're going to die here.
You've committed the crimes, pay the man.
Yep.
Pay the
Apart from anything else, he got life because he killed someone in prison. That was nothing to do with what he was locked up for in the first place.
Correct.
So it should be a separate thing, really.
But I whoever it is, they'll find you. nowadays.
Yeah.
Loads of
Too
people
easy.
got podcasts nowadays. Ex-mobsters and
Probably
stuff.
people have put the lives on their lives. It'll come.
You think?
Yeah.
Some of them are big, like that Sammy the Bull Gravano, I think it is. He's always on podcasts and he's always talking to people and stuff. Yeah, there's a few really high level ones. It's really interesting to listen to be fair. Some of them don't incriminate people though. They say I did what I did. I've moved on with my life. I'll talk about it, but I won't talk names. I won't talk places.
Wasn't the South American gangster's son been on a few programs? The big
El Chapo,
yeah,
his son that got arrested the other week.
You talking El Chapo? Or are you talking?
I think it's the other one. I can't remember. Name escapes me.
Narcos.
Yeah.
Mine's gone blank.
Same.
I think there's a series on it, and it was his son. It's like a.
Oh God.
I
I
know.
almost said Al Capone there.
Yeah.
Struggle
I can see him. I can literally
Same, I
see his
picture his
face.
face. Can't think of his name.
Yeah,
Mine's
the
gone blank.
rats were eating his money
Yeah.
because he had that much of it stuck.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Unbelievable. It'll come back to you. in a minute.
Can't believe I forgot his name. Mine's gone blank.
There's a P. All I can see is a P, and I can't.
Pablo.
Pablo
Escobar.
Escobar.
That's the
Jesus.
fella. Yeah, I think it's a program about his son, like a series, and he used to talk about this, that, and the other. But really, really interesting. Though.
Is he a criminal though?
Don't think so. No, he was. But I don't think he was in prison.
He was
or
the
anything like
accountant.
that.
Yeah. Just knew some people.
He did a brilliant job of it too, with mobster convictions rising 800% during his time in office. That's one of the reasons some people believe the Mafia played a major role in the assassination of his brother, President John F. Kennedy, in November 1963. Seismic though the killing of President Kennedy was, it couldn't stop the events that Valaki's confession had set in motion. Several laws were subsequently passed by Congress to give the FBI greater powers to tackle the Mafia head-on. The most groundbreaking being the so-called RICO Act of 1970. The act essentially made it illegal to be part of a, quote, ongoing criminal enterprise, regardless of whether or not you were actually caught committing any crimes. That made it significantly easier to convict known mobsters. But more importantly, it suddenly made it possible to go after mob bosses who were unlikely to ever get directly involved in the dirty work their organizations were built on. The thinking was that this would mean more convictions and longer sentences. And boy did it work. The man at the spearhead of this revolution was US Attorney Rudy Giuliani, and he wasted no time wreaking RICO havoc. In 1985, he brought the heads of 3 of the 5 families to trial using the RICO statute, in what was dubbed the case of cases. And it turned out to be a case of Giuliani 1, 5 families 0. As all 3 mob bosses were sentenced to 100 years in prison. It set a precedent for the next 30 years, with Mafia bosses frequently given major jail time when brought to court as part of a RICO investigation. And as surveillance became more sophisticated, the FBI also increasingly used wiretaps to ensnare mobsters. Faced with huge sentences and often having incriminated themselves on tape anyway, more and more gangsters conveniently forgot about their oath of silence and happily sang like canaries in order to spend less time behind bars. Even those in the Mafia who seemed untouchable were eventually, well, touched. John Gotti was nicknamed the Teflon Don because nothing ever seemed to stick to him, a flashy dresser who actively courted publicity. When he took over as head of the Gambino family in the mid-80s, it was the richest of the 5 families, with an annual income of $500 million. But after years as the most flamboyant and famous gangster in New York, his best friend and underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano, testified against him. And in 1992, Gotti was sent to prison for life, with no possibility of parole.
So what's that? 30, I can't think today. 33 years later, he's on podcasts talking about it, and he's still alive.
Is that him?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I'm surprised at that.
That's one of the people I was talking about.
Right, okay.
I'm not advocating for doing this behaviour in the first place.
Gotti died, didn't he?
Yeah, he died in prison, I think. I remember the Fun Loving Criminals song about him, the King of New York.
Oh, really?
That was quite big over here at one
Yeah.
point. But yeah, I think once everyone's going, there's no hill to die on, so to speak.
Yeah.
At this point, for these people who've made these decisions, I mean, not for your average
And
normal person.
these guys are pretty wise to it as well, though. Do you know what I mean? The ones that are out, the ones that are grasses. So they know how to look after the shoulder, they know how to look after themselves.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But they're also one felony away from the rest of their lives in prison again. So if he got caught with a gun now or something, probably straight back in there, aren't you?
He died in jail in 2002. With the balance of power having now tipped firmly in the favour of the federal government, the influence of the Mafia continued to dwindle, and the decline was only compounded by increased competition from other gangs, including the Russian Mafia. Same name, furrier hats. But that doesn't mean that America is now Cosa Nostra free. In fact, far from it. The attacks on 9/11 saw a huge switch in the FBI's focus from organised crime to terrorism, with some Mafia task forces dropping from around 400 agents to as few as 20, which inevitably gave the Mafia more room to breathe. As recently as...
Again, the possibilities of the crime families moving from that division to a decoy division, i.e. terrorism.
Yeah.
Put all the resources over there while we carry on doing all our shit over here, make it bigger and get it big and big and big and bigger, while you're focusing on that small little thing over there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that becomes big, this becomes huge, and then all of a sudden they're too small to go and combat that.
Yeah. I think you're right. Especially like advances in technology go both ways. So you've got end-to-end encryption on messaging apps, on all types of stuff. There is, unless you get hold of both devices unlocked, in a lot of cases you're not able to. The FBI can't intercept.
Online fraud is huge these days, isn't it? As well.
Yeah. I mean, you look at you know, when you talk about racketeering and stuff like that, you look at some of the criminal gangs over here, what they're involved in. The biggest thing at the moment is people trafficking. For the sex industry. It's huge.
Yeah.
And you know, would you put it down to the Italians or the Mafia or the you know, it's one nationality that's doing it over here at the moment, or bigger than everyone. And everyone knows what they're doing, but no one's attacking it, no one's talking about it. But it's huge.
Yeah, unfortunately so. I mean, I'd rather people were just dealing in drugs than people, if I'm being
that's what I'm saying. The different
honest.
divisions and different departments all being coordinated simultaneously between all these different divisions around the world. It's massive. It's bigger than it's ever been.
You know, if you think about how much with cryptocurrency and all this sort of stuff, how much fraud is actually going on as well, there's probably even less resources.
Tip of the iceberg, mate.
But what I mean is for organisations like the FBI and stuff, now they're investigating some random billionaire cryptocurrency guy that's 23 years old, you know, instead of looking at organised crime to this degree. The Mafia are probably small compared to some of these crypto guys that
Governments
are
are involved. Governments are involved in this. Very, very high-end people are involved around the world.
Yeah.
It's never going to end. They're not even close.
No, as long as
it's a job for someone to do. Just go and do that, and go and get the kids stealing the weed down the road.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You go, let the big boys play over here.
They'll never cut it out completely, will they? Never.
I don't think human nature changes whatsoever. I think civilization does a little bit. I think technology does, things like that. But I think people are exactly the same now as they were 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, of course. Criminals adapt, don't they, to the modern way, and
there's always going to be people.
It goes on.
Always going to be people who want to act outside the constraints of society and do their own thing and not be told what to do. And
of course,
that does not change, and it never will. I don't think it ever will.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I know people who've got a hell of a lot of money, and I think I look at them and go, "Really? Construction?
Right.
Seems legit."
Which inevitably gave the Mafia more room to breathe. As recently as 2019, the FBI estimated that there were still as many as 3,000 active members of the Mafia in the US, and the legendary 5 families continue to operate to this day. So whilst it's fair to say that the glory days of the American Mafia are far behind them, when it comes to the mob, only a fool would say that you should forget about it. Thanks for watching.
Nice. That's a great video.
Yeah, it's good narrator, isn't he?
He is very good.
Even the editing and everything was just keeps it interesting.
Yeah, I like that. Interesting story. I always, like you said, Dave, I've always been fascinated with things like this about organised crime and and different the way things are. And people always say the Mafia because it's like the old traditional sort of like way it is sort of thing. But the organised crime nowadays, like I say,
it's big business, isn't it?
Off the charts.
There's just so much money involved in it, isn't there? You know, it is a business. You know,
it's why when you see, you hear stories and you see CCTV footage of someone going and like robbing a liquor store in the States or something and getting like $180 and then hurting someone in the process, getting like 20-30 years in prison. And then you look at mobsters and it's organised crime and they do some horrible things, but they make millions, and then they get 30 years in prison or whatever.
Because it's so filtered from what the person they're getting. They haven't committed the crime.
Yeah, true.
They've not done anything wrong.
But I think if you're going to live that life, a lot of people go into crime because they're stupid and they just don't know anything else.
Yeah.
And then they go and hold up a liquor store and go and do 30 years in prison for it.
It's literally it's like an army. And you sort of like alluded to that at the start. It's like an army where you can have your soldiers and you can have your admirals sort of thing, whatever you call them in the army. But it's everyone in between.
Yeah.
You've got all different tiers of different people who are reporting to the next person, to the next person, to the next person.
And we've got families involved.
And there's that much money involved, and there's
partners,
that much money involved.
brothers, sisters, just...
Everyone can eat from the pie because there's that much money involved. Just your share isn't as big as the person above you.
Yeah.
It's like business. It's like everything.
I wonder how many of them went on to legitimate business. That's why the numbers dwindled a little bit, though. Because, it's literally the Godfather, isn't it? It's why he was opening the casinos and
but
stuff.
that's only one department, is what I'm saying.
I know
that's
that.
only one division.
But I'm saying how many people became filthy rich off it.
Oh,
and it's not because the cops were just coming down. They're just like, we've wanted to go legit for ages, and now we're millionaires, and we're going to start some businesses.
Yeah, that's what loads of people even now in modern day now. People are doing that all the time.
Yeah,
they're making just enough to sort of like say, you know what, I don't need to go to jail now. I've got enough now to sort of like do what I need to do.
Step out
and they walk away.
That thing with the RICO Act as well is they can actually take your assets, can't they?
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that came in where they could do that. So it used to be that the guy goes to prison and the rest of the family look after his family, whereas it was the guy goes to prison, the FBI come and take the house, take the cars, take all the money, and then suddenly it's a different story.
It's the same
looking
over
after
here.
someone's family.
It's the proceeds of crime, isn't it? You know, even over here, you get people going to jail if they bought big houses and cars, but the police can go and get those as well, can't they? Repossess them, and they can't just. Otherwise it's still out there, isn't it? For
you've also got the situation over here is a hardened criminal who's like a senior sort of member of a mob, sort of organised crime, let's say, goes to jail and he's been legit caught and he goes to jail and he's serving legit time and no one can do anything about it. He's so looked after in there that prison guards' families are looked after outside. And when he gets a hard time in that prison, then prison guards' families get hard time, and other prisoners' families get hard times, and that's how it's governed.
Yeah,
You've got to live with it.
I've seen prisons in the States where it's kind of like high-level people that are in there, mobsters, but also people from sort of, like Mexican criminals, gang leaders and things like that. And the people who work in the prison are wearing balaclavas and they're covered up and they get bussed in every day and stuff because they can't risk the people knowing who they are.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're right. You're definitely right about that. And you think how much your average prison guard gets paid in this country, probably.
Yeah. If it was me, I know what I'd be doing. I know how that system works. I'd be like all over it. I'd be straight in there, bullshit my way through. Wouldn't you? You've got to fight the fight. That's what you
First day as a prison guard. Who wants drugs?
Form a queue. Form a queue. Let's start with a big guy.
Squatting over a bucket. Let's give me a couple of minutes.
Frankfurt, was it?
Yeah, it was interesting that though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.